Hey, everybody. Welcome back to ProAV Today. I'm your host, as always, Ben Thomas. You know, as an industry, we are really good at making technology. I think that's one of the defining characteristics of our industry. But one of the things that we evolve as an industry that we sometimes struggle with is being a hammer in search of a nail, right? Or a piece of technology in search of a buyer, and not always being solution oriented or problem solving oriented. And one of the verticals that you see that, at least anecdotally, in my opinion, is in that world of sort of collaboration and remote work and workspaces and things like that, especially as we respond to a lot of the changing preferences, styles, even mandates with a lot of employers and enterprise organizations. And I wanted to have a conversation today that centered a little bit more around sort of the state of where that is, not only from an enterprise standpoint, but from a design and an aesthetic standpoint. Some of the things that we're seeing in modern workspaces to keep employees engaged, active, and participating in that workplace culture. So to have that conversation, I brought on everybody's favorite AV architect, conversationalist, designer. I don't know, Kay. You're doing a little bit of everything. You're having conversations all over the place.
Pain in the ass, whatever you want to call me. It's good. It's all good.
Well, I don't know if I would add that superlative in there, but it is Kay Sargent from HOK, a familiar face to a lot of us in the AV community. Kay, thanks so much for coming on today.
More than happy to join you on this Friday afternoon.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kay, I kind of said it in jest, but we as a community are really good at making technology. But a lot of times we really struggle with understanding our buyers, understanding use cases and solving problems. And obviously, the world of workplaces is one of those core places where our industry has just sort of struggled to have a continued conversation. I want to really level set today, too, as somebody, you get to have these conversations all the time, not only with end users, but from a technology standpoint, with integrators and designers and consultants and folks across all the channel. I want to ask, really, first question, where in the heck are we in the life cycle of the workspace?
Yeah. What day is it? What hour is it? I mean, it's constantly changing. So, look, here we are, 4.5 years after we got hit with the pandemic, and I think a lot of things are still kind of up in the air. We are nowhere close to where we started, but we are not where we're going to end up. And quite frankly, I'm not sure we're ever going to stop evolving and changing. That might just be the new reality that we need to get to. What I am hoping is that we've gotten beyond the ludicrous discussion of should everybody be in the office or should everybody be out of the office, because depending on who you are, what you do, what your company is, where you are, it could be very, very different. And so one thing that we know is one size fits all. I think a lot of companies are having to reassess what is important to them and to create the right solutions. And in some cases, that's more remote work. And in other cases, it's bringing everybody back or some kind of a combination of the two. So we're trying to get a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more tailored. But for everybody, technology is becoming much more pivotal because it's how we stayed connected during COVID. I mean, what's amazing, can you imagine if actually this would have happened 10 years ago, where we would have been without the technology that we had today, et cetera, or even 20 years ago, et cetera? I think it would have been very different. And it also begs the question, are we that much more prepared going forward? I think we are. And what's coming down the line that could maybe enable that even more? So I think our industry, quite frankly, is at an intersection. And we've talked a little bit about how this might be our Kodak moment, right? Where disruption has come in, but we don't know how to handle it. And so we don't do anything. And then it happens to us instead of by us. But I think the analogy I would use right now is that, everybody had to take a hard left turn. But basically our industry is kind of like this big tractor trailer, and we couldn't make that turn. And so we're kind of stuck in the middle of this intersection, and companies don't know, do we go forward? Do we try to go back? And some are saying, well, we don't know what's ahead, but we know what was behind us. So let's just go back to what we know. But that reality doesn't really exist anymore, right? Kind of the cat's out of the bag. People have seen there's different tools, there's different dynamics today. and there's societal shifts. There's all kinds of things that have just made it that we kind of have to keep going through that turn, but we're kind of stuck right now, and we're trying to help everybody get through that turn.
Well, and it's weird too, because everybody expects us to be the subject matter expert on everything, which is not a bad problem, right? You want your integrator and channel communities and folks like that to be able to answer a lot of questions. But I think, we don't always know, especially like you mentioned, being that tractor trailer, we don't always know what's happening tomorrow or in 2 days. So we're trying to solve problems that we don't quite know exist yet. But one thing that's been really interesting, and even here at my day job, I've seen this. What has happened pretty dramatically, what I would say with commercial office spaces, is a mass repurposing, right? Because you've got sort of this influx of people. Some are in, some are out. We're building studios. We've got experience centers. We've got all these different things to help empower folks in the office. What are some of those innovations where you're seeing people are saying, hey, we never even would have considered having a broadcast studio in our office 10 years ago? What are some of the things that you're seeing that from a technology perspective, workplaces are kind of putting in to help support those that do decide to come in?
Digital signage, podcast rooms, technology that's kind of integrated into and kind of behind the scenes a little bit. But what I think is interesting is, as we've gone kind of high tech, our human instinct has kicked in and we're pushing back a little bit. And there's a little bit of a high touch movement where we don't want these super sterile environments. We don't want everything totally to be run by technology. We want authentic or, organic, stylized spaces that feel more personal to us as humans, but we want them to be enabled by technology. And I think one of the biggest challenges that you all have right now in dealing with companies' needs is, in the past, people wanted to put technology in, and everybody wanted it to be simple and seamless and, kind of idiot proof, right? Like user proof, I'll say, okay? But there's always user error, right? That's the problem. And so what happens in many cases is that the in-house teams want it to be consistent from one room to another so that anybody can walk in, they understand how to do it, and it's great. But that means that you're probably dumbing down the solution, right? On the other side of this, you have cases where people come in and they put in technology that nobody understands. And it ends up being a $50,000 piece of artwork on the wall that nobody knows how to use, right? And so we really have to address the digital fitness of an organization. And that has changed. And we need to decide what's more important, that we have consistency across all of the rooms, or that we have different levels of sophistication so that people can have access to different spaces. And or do we really flip it upside down and say, why do you even own technology, and why do you have all these conference rooms? Why not have a tricked out conference center in the building that everybody can leverage, that's run by somebody, that's got the state of the art everything, and you don't have to own it, you just have to have access to it. So I think there's a fundamental question that a lot of our clients are asking right now. And of course, look, everybody wants them to be able to have more equitable engagements with people that are working remotely and the people that are in the office. That's still tricky. It's still really tricky. And I think conference rooms have been totally redesigned and kind of pivoted so that we can have more equitable engagement, but it's still kind of a difficult one to get to. I mean, there's all kinds of great solutions out there, but will the people that are remote have the same experience as the people in the room? No, they're not going to. They can be as equally represented during the time frame that's on, but they're not going to be involved in the meeting before the meeting. They're not going to just pick up on all the body language. They're not going to pick up on all those other things that are happening in that room. And that's why some companies have said it's either all in person or all virtual. The hybrid is tough.
Yeah. Well, what it's also done, which is really interesting to me, is it's sort of muddied the waters from a channel standpoint. And what I mean by that is, look, obviously someone might come to HOK and say, hey, I'm looking at redoing my entire office, or I'm looking at adding these different things.
We hope that happens every day, but yes.
Yeah, right, which happens literally every day. Right. But the challenge is now, where does technology fit in that conversation, and how early does it come in, right? Because you'll have especially depending on your decision maker, right? You may have a chief sustainability officer, or you may have a customer engagement. Like, you have all sorts of different stakeholders who may come in and say, oh, we want all of our digital signage systems to follow somebody around the office. And that's an idea that they have. And then on the other side, you say, have someone coming in with a clean slate that says, we don't really know what we want to do at all. Guide us, right? How early do you have to have that technology conversation?
My honest answer is not going to be very popular with a lot of designers and architects, but I really don't think we should have a test fit approved before we brought in the AV-IT guys, because if I size a room or proportion it, or the way where I lay it out, or how I position it in the space, I can derail your ability to employ successful solutions down the line. And so if I'm not bringing you in early enough to really understand what's having to happen, it's too late. And so what we've really invented our entire process. And we have something called gathering spaces that we bring our AV-IT consultants and the client and their in-house folks, everybody to the table early on in the process, so we can make sure that the room is big enough to accommodate people walking around in it, or a hybrid meeting, or that we're not just shoving a table up against a wall with a monitor, but now it's not handicap accessible because it's a touch screen now and nobody can get to that touch screen.
Or that there's power in the conference room.
Right. and so there's all of those things that, quite frankly, we make a determination early on when we're sizing rooms and positioning them about that impact the technology and the success that it's going to have in those spaces. And so to us, we believe you all need to be on board early in the process to really kind of make sure that we're getting those spaces correct.
Well, and that technology too, I mean, obviously, look, it's easy to talk about cameras and sound and all that stuff too, but technology now, whether it be lighting, whether it be, all sorts of different things, is part of the eye candy. It's part of the design of the actual room itself. It's the aesthetic. What's been cool to see, and a lot of this, ironically enough, is driven from the world of like home and residential automation, where people can walk in their door and their lights change colors and go off whenever they leave the room, things like that. It's interesting to see how that technology space has sort of found its way into the aesthetic world too. I mean, how are some of the ways that you guys have seen that crossover happen even in the last 5-6 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always been this hesitation for designers for us to put technology, embed it in anything like the furniture, or even when we put it in the wall and we want it kind of in the wall, so it's not just hanging on the wall. We want it to be part of that. But technology is evolving and so rapidly that the sizes might change, the configurations might change, et cetera. And so we're looking for more sophisticated solutions that can help make it look more customized and built in, without running the risk of designing this beautiful little niche that, in a year from now, the technology doesn't fit in that niche. And so now it's a construction issue, right? So we're having to be much more innovative about how we're incorporating that. And there's a lot of better products on the market right now to also do that. And I think also we're creating, we're doing immersive rooms, we're leveraging, VR, AR, we're leveraging all of these things in the spaces to really kind of create amazing opportunities and experiences that you couldn't have even dreamed of 10 years ago, which is really exciting. But we also want to make sure that it's just not so overwhelming from a technology standpoint that it comes off being anti-human.
Well, I'm curious too, and this may even go back to the larger question of how a lot of these conversations start. But, as we bring a lot more of the IT-centric folks in, right? If we're putting a digital signage system in, if we're putting in a new UCC system, things like that, obviously we introduce IT and the signal flow and the AV folks that are on staff into part of that conversation. But then you still have the facilities folks, you've got security, you've got, your HR teams. How have you seen that decision maker and even that initiation process evolve? Because look, it's still a nut that we're trying to figure out in our industry, obviously, who's buying stuff these days, because it seems like everybody. But how are those conversations starting from the kind of the architecture and design and consultant standpoint?
Yeah, it's amazing. Space has been around for a long time, but we still don't really have a good understanding of a lot of things about it, like who owns it, Okay. So about 10 years ago,
I don't know
think
that we're ever getting that one, unfortunately.
I know. 10 years ago, when people started realizing that it's really about the experience, about the human experience, people were like, well, that's HR. So maybe HR should be in charge of this. And we always wanted HR at the table, but all of a sudden, now they're at the head of the table and they're making all these decisions about real estate because it's about the human experience. But there's a lot of nuances, technical things, OpEx, all these things that are really complicated. And HR's got their own struggles. So there was a period of time where they had a very prominent role, and in some organizations they still do. And in the beginning of the pandemic, it was almost like kind of a turf war about, well, who owns work, HR or real estate? And I think what happened pretty quickly is that a lot of people in the real estate world, they're getting a lot of eyes on them, and a lot of people in the HR world now are realizing this is a lot more complicated than we thought, and it's not a piece of cake. In fact, this is a very touchy subject. And so what we really are focusing on today are trying to break down those silos. We need security, we need IT, we need FM, we need HR, and we need corporate real estate people all at the table together and the lines of business to really understand what are your needs. And so it's about kind of having that holistic approach and breaking down some of those silos that are going to lead to greater success. Long gone are the days where the AVIT guy didn't get a call until we were about to install everything and we needed you to come in and put your stuff in the room.
Right. Well, that's a struggle, like I said, that we face day to day in the AV side of things, because, the IT buyer may be responsible for X, Y, and Z, and then the security and facility side of things is responsible for X, Y, and Z. But they need to talk to each other. They need to work together. They're a lot of times leveraging those systems. So you're right. We have to be able to have that holistic conversation. And I want to ask too, you obviously get to live in the world of more the design and architecture side, but what are some of the things that you wish maybe more the technology providers, the technologists that are in our world maybe knew a little bit more about that earlier on process, that architecture, that design process? What are some of the things that you would say to maybe us as an industry as we continue to build products and make services really that are designed to help empower folks at the end of the line?
Well, you started with it to one degree, which was an industry that is a hammer in search of a nail, right? I also think that it's really important that, like, you guys end up speaking your own language. Half the time people don't understand what you guys are even talking about. And then you guys convince people to buy something that is way beyond what they might actually really need, but it's cool. It's the latest thing. We want to put this in there, right? But it doesn't necessarily fit the need of the user. It might be too sophisticated. It may not be sophisticated. Okay, it's never not sophisticated enough. You guys like your toys and gadgets, but often it's too much. And the people don't know how to use it, and then they get frustrated, and then they don't use it, right? Or it's not fit for purpose. So I think it's really, really important that we have you guys involved to understand the needs of the user, to understand that the fitness, the digital fitness, and the ability of those users, so that we can create the right solutions for those teams. And then working with the designers to really kind of think about the things that we may not necessarily be thinking about. Diversity and inclusion is a huge issue today. Making sure that we're creating spaces that are really accessible to a broader group of the population is really important today. Making sure that we're enabling people, not overwhelming people, I think is another important element. And making sure that we're not creating environments that feel too robotic, too sterile, or too futuristic. On the other hand, people want to be enabled. And right now, people, I think, have a better experience in their cars than they do in their workplace. The auto industry is kicking our butt right now. You can get your car and it does all kinds of stuff to you. People are still crawling around trying to find an outlet in an office, right? And so we have to get more sophisticated, and we need to think about how do we bring that technology in to enable the user experience. And we do all kinds of focus on the building and building automation, but what are we really doing to help people navigate through the space better and to have more choice and options and get access to that data so that they can decide, do I want to go sit on the second floor because it's quieter and it's 2 degrees cooler and my team is up there? Or do I want to sit on the 5th floor because it's hotter and it's loud and it's noisy and it's a Friday and that's where I want to be, right? So we need to think about how are we empowering the individuals and giving them options and choices that meet their needs.
Man, I'm stealing the car analogy, by the way. I think that's the truest thing I've ever heard, is that the experience in a car is oftentimes better than an experience in a workplace, because you're right. Cars uniquely have that UX and UI sort of kind of figured out, right? I mean, it's where people spend, depending on who you talk to, right? Obviously, the remote worker is going to argue with me on that, which is fine, totally fine. It spends less time in their car, obviously, than someone like me who commutes an hour and a half a day.
I don't know. They actually say that a lot of people that are working from home, the amount of time that they're spending going back and forth to the grocery store or to grab lunch or to do this or to do that, just like to get out, actually isn't as little as you would think.
I need to look into that. I'm curious. Now you've got me fully fascinated in the world of cars. I need to go to CES and see what's up next there. But I'll tell you what, Kay, I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball, which is always the toughest question. And we'll land the plane with this. Let's look 5-10 years down the road. What are some of the things that you think will continue to impact the kind of the workplace, and some of the things that'll stick, and maybe some of the things that we're going to lose and go by the wayside? What are some of those things that you think maybe the next 5-10 years will stick or go away?
I'm going to say that, and it might be a little bit more than 5 or 10 years. I don't know, maybe it will be. I think there's a societal shift underway here. I don't think people don't want to come back to the office because the workplace sucks. Some do, but not all. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people are going to be living a lot longer, and they don't want to have to necessarily commute the same way that they have to do now. But if artificial intelligence is coming on board and it really truly can improve productivity, I think we have a moment to really think about, what do we do with that increased productivity? Do we just ratchet up corporate profits and make our lives even more stressful? Or do we say, okay, why don't we go to a 4-day work week? Because the younger generation, this child you are about to have, it is projected that their working life will be 67 years.
Oof.
Which is
work can be actual, like
the time they
post-16?
work, right? If we're going to live longer, you're going to have to work longer unless something miraculously comes about and solves it. And if artificial intelligence could actually improve productivity, but also at the same time improve our lives by maybe not stressing us out as much, maybe we work a little bit less, but we get those gains back. I think that's something that we really need to think about. And the last person that did that was Henry Ford. When he invented the assembly line, it was a 6-day work week, 12-hour days. The labor force was crushing it, and they were, rioting all over the place. When he did that, he realized it was going to ratchet up productivity, but instead of just going for big corporate profits, he gave something back to his workers, and he introduced the 5-day work week. And that has stuck. We have an opportunity right now. We missed it with computers. But if we were to today say, we can't sustain working the way we are working right now for 60 some odd years. We just can't. And so we have to figure out a way to make life more sustainable, but we don't really want to lose productivity. But can we leverage technology to actually help us from a societal standpoint? That's what I'm hoping we'll see in the next 5 to 10 years.
See, that's what fires me up, is the idea that, obviously AI, at the end of the day, we want to help people be productive and create more meaningful outcomes with less inputs, right? But, there is that human element of the workplace. And I think that that's often the thing that gets thought of last, is the person at the end of the line, the user, that person who does have to punch that clock, right? Metaphorically speaking, in most cases. But I tend to agree. I think that the human-centric approach and leveraging technology will be the thing that continues to influence us. And I agree with you. We're closer to the 4-day work week, I think, that people realize.
Well, listen, I think it's a societal element that people get wrong. Like, technology is, I don't want to say easy to predict, but if you go back and you look at science fiction, most of where we are today, the Jetsons, Star Trek, all of those things, they kind of predicted where we would be in many cases. What they totally got wrong was the societal elements of all of that. Go back and look, it's almost comical how bad they were. Like it was kind of like frozen in time. Like we never progressed past 1950. It is a societal element of all of this, the human factor that we always underestimate and we fail to predict for. So it's not just about thinking about technology. And by the way, the other thing that's going to happen with technology is the e-waste on the planet right now. I am shocked that nobody has made more of a big deal about this. My generation has to apologize for styrofoam containers, but the younger generation, the e-waste that is being dumped on the planet right now is unbelievable. And the amount of energy that is being used for all of this technology and storage, even having our cameras on, is sucking energy and data and all of those things. We're not thinking about the sustainability impact of technology on our planet, and at some point, that's going to smack us in the face, and there's going to be a heavy toll that we're going to have to pay for that.
Well, Kay, I'll tell you what, you'll be with us there every step of the way, hopefully guiding people like me who are idiots in general about a lot of different things. And that's why we have people like you on, right? Because I don't know a lot of answers and people like you do. I'll tell you what, Kay, we always look forward to having conversations with you, and we can't wait to see you again on the trade show circuit. Until then, thanks so much for coming on.
Always happy to.
Awesome. And thank you so much for tuning in as well. We always love to see you. It's great to have you on ProAV Today. Like, subscribe, do whatever. Just listen to us. We like it. Have fun. Hey, we'll see you next time on ProAV Today.